A lot of you guys doubted, and 7 years later, we finally got Silksong. And what a game to follow up with after a game like Hollow Knight, because it's better in every way, in my opinion. And a lot of people have their complaints, and we'll talk about it. I think they're super valid, but compared to Hollow Knight, I think it's a better game, which is almost hard to believe because Hollow Knight was, in my opinion, a perfect game. Hollow Knight got me through my time being furloughed during 2020, and it became my entire brain space for a long time. Um, I sank almost 200 hours into Hollow Knight, and I think I'm about halfway there with Silksong. I still haven't gotten the true ending yet, but I am currently working on it over on Twitch, and you can be a part of that if you would like to. Let's go ahead and talk about Silksong a little more in depth. First, we're going to talk about the protagonist versus in this game versus the protagonist in Hollow Knight. Um, Hornet is a much more fleshed out character. Um, she actually actively interacts with her environment and the the world around her. She, in my opinion, is a little cuter. Um, and oddly enough, she's the only character, to my knowledge, that we see without her cloak. Um, and it turns out that Hornet is like 90% head. Also, she when she sits at a bench, she crosses her legs. She plays an instrument, which is reminiscent of like classic Zelda games like Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, Wind Waker. Um, so I thought that was a great addition because that's something that I miss in the current Zelda games. She moves a lot faster than the knight does. You can get the Dash Master in Hollow Knight, but Hornet just it feels like she is in a hurry on her mission versus the knight where you can be a little more lackadaisical about it. And I like the faster pace. Uh, Similarly, Hornet also can get like a sprint tool charm thing, and I don't think it's really necessary. But you know what? For those of us in a hurry, because who isn't these days, you have that option. And also one really cool thing is the knight in Hollow Knight has a pretty limited set of skills. You have your nail, you have your four spells, I believe, and that's pretty much it. Starting out, Hornet's Pogo is, in my opinion, hot garbage because I don't know why does it go why does she go diagonal? That doesn't make any sense to me. Like just out of nowhere for no reason. But you have four, five crests that you can get that drastically change how Hornet does any of her attacks, and that's really cool. We're going to talk about the environments. Like, starting off right away in Mos Grotto feels like a much more beautiful, lush world, whereas in Hollow Knight, you don't really have that many areas that feel that way. There's Green Path and Queen's Gardens, but for the most part, everything in Hollow Knight felt really dreary. And also, you know, there was no area quite like Biowater in Hollow Knight. And I'm sure that's everybody's least favorite place in Silksong because it feels like Team Cherry was trying to make their version of a poison swamp similar to Dark Souls, like Blight Town, or the area before you fight the Abyss Watchers in Dark Souls 3, or you know, um, Elden Ring has one, but they tried to make one that stood out, and boy, howdy did they, because that place sucks. The like it's like Blighttown on steroids because not only do you have to avoid this water to not get this infection or whatever it's called, uh, you have to platform on top of it. And God, it's a pain in the ass. Just once you get the maggots on your little spool of thread, um, your heal from that point goes to just clearing that effect off. It makes your heal essentially useless. I didn't feel like that added anything to that area. Maybe it makes it a little bit more immersive. It's definitely worse than Deep Nest. Deep Nest was just scary. Firewater, hot garbage. Just a horrible place that probably when I do a second playthrough, I will not be revisiting. One thing that's really cool in comparison to Hollow Knight is bugs are infected in Hollow Knight with with the infection. And as a result, there's really not that many NPCs. There's like Quirrell, there's Mila for a little bit, RIP, Hornet, um, Elderbug, and Dirtmouth, and sort of, like other NPCs from the DLC like Grim or what have you. In Silksong, there are many more characters or NPCs that you can interact with that make it a joy just to explore the world itself. For instance, Sherma, who is a lovely little bug with a lovely little song. Chakra, who is the new cornifer of the world. Um, there's the bugs in Bone Bottom. There is the bug in Songclave, Bellheart. All of these characters are really well fleshed out and really fun to talk to and make the world feel just that much more enjoyable to be a part of. And also, Hornet being able to actually talk and be part of the world instead of the knight as this sort of silent protagonist like early Fallout games makes Hornet feel more like a character, like more relatable, I guess, and not just like this brutal bug who is full of um, rage and bitterness all the time. So that's really cool to see. In short, I think Hornet is a better character. Well, we're gonna talk about the music compared to Hollow Knight. Hollow Knight has one of my favorite video game soundtracks ever. Period. Full stop. Christopher Larkin is an amazing composer. Now, in Hollow Knight, each area kind of had its own unique theme and sound and feel, and even like Deep Nest, very creepy. The sounds were very creepy. Really well done. And Silksong, the music is a little more atmospheric, similar to Breath of the Wild, but better. Um, and the reason why I compare it to that is because music really isn't a thing in Zelda games anymore, and it's kind of depressing because not depressing, disappointing, because I loved soundtracks or like music in the Ocarina of Time, and that's what I wanted more out of my Zelda games, but that's not what we got, and that's okay. There are areas in Silksong that have more music to them, like I think the choral chambers. Um, but for the most part, it's like the music is really subtle. They're still distinct in each area, but it's more it like I said, it's more atmospheric, except for like boss fights. The music does tend to be a little bit more epic, similar to Dark Souls, where there's really not music except for during the boss fights. And it makes it stand out a little bit more, in my opinion. And there are some really beautiful pieces. Again, I think Christopher Larkin killed it. This is probably a point of contention for players. More than anything, let's talk about the difficulty in Silksong. Hollow Knight was already a hard game, and with boss fights like Nightmare King Grim or the Absolute Radiance or Zote, those were challenging fights. In Silksong, it feels like everything is hard. With the exception of the Moss Mother in Act 1. That's the only boss that I didn't feel like was a complete. I was just bashing my head against the wall every single time. And, at first I was a little bothered by it, but I realized, thanks to a friend explaining, or reminding me, rather, that Hollow Knight or Silksong was intended to be a DLC. So, of course, it was going to be harder. Like, enemies have a lot more health than they did compared to Hollow Knight. And also, you don't get your first nail upgrade until way later in the game. I mean, unless you're just, kind of blazing through it. But I think this game is, with the exception of speedruns, impossible to blaze through. A lot of enemies, especially even bosses, especially bosses, do at least 2 mass damage. And that also applies to contact damage, which is kind of silly because I feel like if you're running into something, it should just be 1 mask. But again, it teaches you to be better and more intentional about your movements. Do I like it? No. Do I think it's a bad thing? No. It's good to be aware of what you're doing, and also like getting hit. Runbacks do seem to be a little bit longer, in my opinion. To be fair though, there's also more benches in Silksong compared to Hollow Knight. So, and I also, except for Biowater, don't think the runbacks are that bad. Biowater was the only one that really just pissed me off because during the Growl fight, there was you go through a gauntlet of like what 3-4 waves of enemies before you actually get to the boss fight. Those enemies are already a pain in the ass because they're not readily they're not constantly there to get hit. They pop up sporadically, quote unquote, and then you can get a couple hits in, they disappear, whatever. It's hard to know where they're going to be, and I hate projectiles. We all remember the bugs in Kingdom's Edge that shot like what 3 things of lava at you. Those were a pain in the ass. These are similar but worse. You do 3 or 4 waves of enemies and then you fight a boss. In my opinion, that's bullshit. There's also a room in the Citadel. I think it's also in the Coral Chambers. You go through waves of enemies. When you get to what you think is going to be the final one, surprise, bitch, there's more. And then you have to fight 2 of the biggest enemy after fighting waves of really annoying enemies. And if you haven't found the room where you deal with the bugs that suck away your silk, you have that to worry about too. And then also there's the Coral Tower where you have to fight through wave after wave of bugs, and then you finally get to face the ultimate challenge, which I haven't completed yet, but hopefully soon I will. And to my knowledge, there's not a bench that you can rest at to replenish your tools. You're just struggling the whole time. You got to get good. I am not that good of a gamer compared to most people, I think. I don't know. That's just me. I am not good at not getting hit. So I can't always use my silk skills, aka spells, or at least that's what I'm calling them from here on out. That's another thing actually. When it comes to combat, I feel like the Silk spells are a lot slower compared to the spells in Hollow Knight. I think they could be a little faster, but maybe they also hit for more damage. But again, enemies have so much health in Silksong that it, it feels like it doesn't really matter how much damage you do. So we're gonna wrap up here because this is getting a little long-winded, more long-winded than I kind of intended. In my opinion, Silksong is still a perfect game. I think it does exactly what it set out to do, um, which is to be a sequel, obviously, but also I think it's a better game than Hollow Knight because of how fleshed out the world is. There's so many different areas. There's so many different enemies. There's also you have an instrument. Hornet is actively. I mean, not that the the bug in Hollow Knight wasn't trying to save the world, but Hornet is taking a very active role in it, and she lets the NPCs know that that's what she's trying to do, and I think that's really cool. I feel like areas like Biowater or the Mist or Putrefied Ducts are trying to be challenging areas, and I think they succeeded in that. Do I like them? No, but I still think they're really well done because that's what they're trying to be challenging. They're I think they're trying to be the worst portion of the game. And actually I liked the Mist. I think it's a great area, and I think it has one of my favorite boss fights in the game, maybe in the Hollow Knight series. I think it's better than Hollow Knight, which is kind of wild to me because Hollow Knight was a masterpiece in my mind and kind of a godsend if you think about it. Well, if I think about it. Maybe I'm kind of seeing it through rose-colored lenses because that's what I wanted it to be and that's what I hoped it would be. But I honestly I did go in a little skeptical. I had high hopes, but I also tried to keep them reasonable. And I feel like I did a pretty decent job of that. And I also will say that, I'm cautiously optimistic about DLC for this game because I know there are going to be boss fights that I'm just stuck on for hours and hours and hours. And that's okay because it gives the game longevity, and that's what I want out of my video games. I'm sure I'll be replaying Silksong for years to come, and I'll probably go back to Hollow Nest too. Those are my thoughts on Silksong. Let me know what you think. Did did Silksong live up to your expectations and your hopes? Do you think it's as hard as I think it is? This has been GameFeelz. You've been great. I'll see you in the next one.